We are honored to welcome Donna Martin, creator of Soma Yoga and Soma Yoga Therapy. Donna brings over 50 years of experience in yoga, meditation, and embodied mindfulness. She is one of the world's most senior Hakomi teachers, a gentle experiential method of mindfulness-based self-discovery, and she worked closely with its founder, Ron Kurtz, for more than 2 decades. Donna is also one of 7 legacy holders entrusted with carrying his work forward. Her approach is gentle, respectful, and deeply transformative, supporting people in meeting themselves with curiosity, compassion, and wholeness. Donna is the author of Soma Yoga Therapy, co-author of The Practice of Loving Presence, and creator of the Remembering Wholeness trilogy. We're truly grateful to have her with us. Donna, if it's okay with you, I will start asking some questions to start the conversation. Donna, you've been practicing and teaching yoga and embodied mindfulness for more than 50 years, and you said that meeting Ron Kurtz was a turning point in your life. Could you share how you met him and what immediately resonated for you in the Hakomi approach? Thank you.
I'll tell you the story about how I met Ron Kurtz, who is the creator of Hakomi, and that kind of was a turning point in my life. But I need to back up before that happened, which was 1990, so that was a long time ago. I had been teaching yoga for many years. I was invited to teach yoga at this wonderful retreat center on Cortes Island in British Columbia, Western Canada. It's a place that has different presenters offering workshops and retreats from about April through October. And the retreats that come there are everything from basket weaving and mushroom picking and psychotherapy and African drumming and dance and yoga and lots of different things. So it's a wonderful place. And one year I was teaching there, and somebody noticed that my style of teaching reminded them of this man, Ron Kurtz, and his method, Hakomi. And so I noticed that he was coming to give a retreat, and it was going to be during the time I was there as a yoga teacher, so it was easy for me to take that. And I think what really struck me about it was that something that I had discovered over already 20 or 30 years of practicing and teaching yoga, which was that I think a practice like that is about self-awareness. And I think the healing journey that any of us are on is one of remembering who we truly are. I call it remembering wholeness. And I point out that healing is a verb, and it's actually the verb of wholeness. And so I don't think wholeness is something out there that we're on a journey to, or anything we need to, in a way, recover. I think it's a journey of remembering our innate intrinsic wholeness. And Hakomi is a method that is used by psychotherapists, but there are many more applications of it than just in a psychotherapy setting. And the people who
Mm.
come to experience Hakomi, which I'll tell you about the word in a moment, come really realizing that understanding ourselves is a key to whatever healing means for each of us. Understanding what's in the way of having more nourishing experiences in life? What's actually causing our own unnecessary suffering? So it
Mm,
requires, and I know this is, I'm speaking to you on a journey that you will all get this. Uh, it's we're in our own way. It's realizing that I can't blame external conditions. I can recognize that external conditions can cause suffering, but unnecessary suffering is how I'm organizing my own experience, who I think I am, how I'm making sense of the world, how I'm limiting myself or even hurting myself by how I'm responding to life. And that's what Hakomi is about. So I loved it because that's what I had been teaching with yoga. And before I met Ron, I was also had been working for many years in with a group of people on a recovery journey. So I was working in a center in Canada for um, drug and alcohol abuse recovery. And it was an interesting program because it was a government funded program. So it was free service for anybody whose life had ever been affected by anybody's substance abuse. And I think they branched into all kinds of addictive behaviors besides substance. But when I was working there, it was about substance abuse, but it wasn't only people in recovery from their own substance abuse. It was people whose life in some way, whether as children with parents or as parents with children or as with spouses or friends, it was people who were on a journey of recovering from the effects of somebody's substance abuse in their life. So it was really open program. And, so what I loved about that was that anybody coming into that program was already willing to look at themselves, was already recognizing that it was their own habits and their habitual reactions that were the cause of their suffering. And if I get somebody, I'm not doing private practice anymore, but when I was having somebody that was coming in uh, because of stress in their life, who wasn't willing to look at themselves and their own habits, it was a much harder journey. So
mm,
I just felt so inspired by the people that I met in that program who varied from um, some of the richest people and businessmen and lawyers and doctors in town to people off the street who were unemployed or working as street workers and everything in between. So that was that. I'm rambling on about my background, and when I met Ron and Hakomi and discovered Hakomi that had even more skillful ways of assisting people to not only to study and discover some of the unconscious habits and beliefs that were causing them suffering, but also to help them remember who they truly were, what their authentic nature was, which is wise and resourced and beautiful.
mm.
And so I that was a turning point for me, and I began to work with Ron and teach with Ron and have taught all over the world as a result. I'll
So
stop
beautiful.
rambling so you can ask the
Okay.
next thing,
All
Binty.
right. Okay. Well, my next question is, how did Soma and Soma yoga therapy emerge from those early roots with Hakomi?
This is great. I'm going to love having this recording afterwards. I haven't been asked that question in such a succinct way. Soma, first of all, let me go back. I said I was going to explain the word Hakomi,
Mm,
which was the word that described Ron Kurtz's work. And he didn't come up with it. He started teaching people how to work the way he was working back in the 1980s. And one of the people in his group had a dream that Ron handed him a slip of paper with this word, Hakomi, Hakomi. And nobody knew what it meant. Nobody had heard of it. So they started to research, and it sounded Japanese and it sounded indigenous somehow. And they found that in the Hopi Indian language, the American Hopi Indians, that word Hakomi had a meaning that felt relevant to the work because the archaic translation of the word is how do you stand in relation to these many realms? It's a kind of who are you question. And the method
Mm,
is all about understanding ourselves. So that's
mm,
where the word Hakomi came from. And I was already a yoga teacher, and Hakomi, the style of Hakomi, which I'll explain very briefly because it's quite simple. Um, the style of Hakomi fit with with my style of teaching yoga, which was the point of it being self-discovery, not about trying to get strong and flexible and being able to stand on your head. But when I do
mm,
the practice, what do I learn about myself? And so I talked to Ron about what if I call it Hakomi yoga? And he said yoga was so ancient that he didn't feel it was appropriate to take Hakomi, which is a psychotherapy method, and apply it to the word yoga. And actually, I read a book not that long ago about the history of psychotherapy, and they named yoga as one of the first psychotherapy methods, the practice of yoga, which is intentionally about being more aware of ourselves and understanding our minds. So that was interesting. But at the time, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to explain that the way I'm teaching yoga, which is really grounded in the ancient wisdom of India of yoga and Tibet. Um, but there's a particular way I'm teaching it that seems different than how it's usually taught in the West.
mm,
And one day I was on my way to a workshop with my colleague Shelley, and we were talking about we need to call it, we need to have a word to describe it. And this word soma, Psoma, popped into my mind. And I thought that's perfect because soma, Soma, comes from the Greek for body. And most people are aware of that.
mm,
And we talk about somatic, and
mm,
um, somatic therapy is more and more popular in the world. And we talk about psychosomatic. And but PS, like in psychology or psyche, from the Greek means mind spirit. So I thought if I just put a P at the beginning of the word soma, then it's like saying mind, body, spirit, all in one word. And because nobody was using it, I thought that can clearly identify that this style of teaching yoga, which is more of an invitation to learn about yourself from exploring body movements and postures, and tapping into the wisdom of your body, that with a really Hakomi flavor, that just identifies it as a particular animal. And the Hakomi flavor is this. It's an invitation to pay attention to yourself with simple curiosity, just with curiosity, not in the judgmental way we often do. But what if I invite you to notice just the way your breath is moving right now? Um, it's very hard to notice anything about ourselves without somehow influencing it. And if I remind you that you're breathing and your attention goes to your breathing, invariably often something changes spontaneously about your breathing. Or you might actually go, oh, I'm not breathing deeply enough and I should breathe deeper. And so that's a habit. And so the invitation is, what if you just notice your breath? And even if it changes, allow it to change, not because you're making it change, but just because that's happening. And so there's this way of paying attention to ourselves with this kind of simple curiosity that's what's happening now, and what changes if I do something different. And the something different is offered as an experiment, not as a correction. So this is different than how a lot of yoga classes are taught. I might have somebody just notice the way they're breathing, and and then invite what happens if you intentionally lengthen the exhalation. Just slow it down a little bit, maybe even as if you're blowing out a candle on a birthday cake. Not because that's the right way to breathe, but let's just do that as an experiment. And any of you that would like to play with this, join me. And so just however you noticed your breathing, just now, if, as an experiment, let's do 3 slow breaths out as if you're blowing out a candle. Or maybe more than one candle, as many candles as you would have on your birthday cake. So lengthening the breath. And one more. And then just stop that as an experiment and come back to just noticing your breathing, whatever it's doing, however it feels. And give me a wave. I can only see a few of you on my screen, but give me a wave if any of you noticed something feels a little different about your breathing, even after that short practice. Because often, just doing something simple, especially as an experiment, and getting lots of thumbs up and waves, creates a change in our experience. And it's so healing. For one thing, I think having a practice of paying attention to ourselves without judgment. Or if judgment comes in, just even noticing that without judging it. So cultivating this capacity for self-awareness with simple, kind of friendly curiosity. And just, so that's what's a, oh, okay. And then doing something, and you can do any practice this way. You can do anything as a practice. You could say a prayer, you could use a mantra, you could do a movement practice, you could listen to music, you could do anything as a practice, and then notice what, if anything, is changing in my experience. How is my embodied experience responding to that? Not because I was doing it to make something happen, but because I was doing it as an experiment to see what, if anything, happens. And that's what Hakomi does. And that's a way of practicing yoga. And so I now call my version of Hakomi, even when it's not yoga, in a yoga setting. I call it Soma, Psoma, because it's a very particular version of Hakomi that leaves out some of the more psychotherapy kind of stuff and is an invitation to people to come back to a really kind of natural, I think, authentic, embodied state where they remember their own wholeness. Thank you for playing with me, those of you who did with that breathing practice.
Thank you, Donna. That was fascinating. Um, I hope my next question follows on seamlessly from that. In Soma, I understand that you work very much with habits, embodied automatic patterns.
Mhm.
How do you see these patterns showing up in people healing from addiction or trauma?
Mhm.
And how do you work with it? Thank you.
There's kind of a way, isn't there? There's a way that everyone has some kind of trauma. It's on a spectrum, of course. It refers to the experience of feeling powerless in response to something that feels abusive, that feels um, like it's causing suffering, and uh, and it gets stored in the body. It gets stored in the embodied mind, the mind in the body, and behaviors become habits when they're repeated. If I'm trying to manage a situation that I feel threatened by, and however I'm managing helps me survive, even even just barely, um, I'll do it again, yeah, and again, and it becomes a habit. And when it becomes an addiction is when it's a habit that's causing more suffering than doing good. And I think everyone has habits that are on automatic, that are attempts to manage a situation or manage life or manage feelings, that are so on automatic that they begin to get in the way more than to help us. There was a famous family therapist, psychotherapist by the name of Virginia Satir, some of you may have heard of. Her work really informed the group therapy that we did at the addiction center I was working at. And she had a saying that I love, which will make sense to most of you, I think. She said, when we were children, the problem was the problem. When we're adults, the coping is the problem. And the coping behaviors are management attempts. They're management adaptations to situations that we felt powerless with. And but if we survived, we did it somehow. And we did it with behaviors that became habits, that if they were habits that are now causing suffering, they're called addictions. So that's my simple version of it. And to get really back to your question, Binty, those habits are embodied. They're strategies, but I can see them as somatic patterns. And so I could ask each of you to notice your own sort of version of a somatic pattern. If, for example, you know that one of your strategies was to withdraw from a situation, either pulling away, making yourself smaller, feeling like you're disappearing, going invisible. This is one category of how to deal with a threatening situation, is to remove ourselves somehow. And there's lots of versions of that, but it'll become a somatic pattern. And so you'll feel it. Some of you, for example, will feel it as a holding your breath. Maybe that was one of the things some of you noticed. Some of you will feel it as a contraction, muscle contraction, as if you could somehow make yourself smaller, or a pulling back, a pressure. There's so many versions of it. There's so many possibilities of how it got expressed in your body, and that will still show up. If it started even as a child, it'll still show up because it becomes habitual as a body pattern. And so when I'm working with somebody, whatever they're telling me about is accompanied by the verbal expression, is accompanied by a nonverbal expression, which is their body way of organizing around whatever they're talking about or thinking about. And that's what Soma looks for. And I look for it because I know it's in contrast to the natural state that we all are in when we feel safe, when we feel like uh, we can be peaceful. We're in a situation, a place perhaps, or with a person or with people that there's no threat, that there's not even a threat to being able to show our feelings or to just be ourselves. It's not even about a threat to our physical safety. It's just, is there a threat to just even being here, being ourselves? When we can feel that, our body expresses that in a particular way. And sometimes there's people describe it as feeling more grounded. Sometimes people feel it as feeling more expansive or feeling tingly. There's an embodied experience of that, which is in contrast to the pattern, the body pattern that shows up when we're reacting to something or trying to be safe. And the withdrawing is only one category of the kind of strategy we have in the face of something traumatic or potentially traumatic or even threatening to our emotional well-being. And another category of strategy might be fight, fight or flight, typically activated. And a third category is a kind of collapse or numbness or play dead. So, but it's their strategies that were adaptations to situations that were either real or imagined, and they are somatic patterns. And that's what I'm looking for in Soma.
You've integrated polyvagal theory with Soma in a very natural way. Um, how does understanding our autonomic nervous system help people move more, work more compassionately with themselves?
I love the polyvagal theory, which is Stephen Porges' way of understanding how our nervous system responds to life. And what's and that's a natural next question. Thank you, because I sort of started to talk about it a little bit. One of the states that he calls a vagal state, ventral vagal state, is this state where we feel safe enough to be present and to be in connection with whoever's there. And when that's not happening, there's a state of activation. The fight or flight state is the activated state. And if that's a state when there's a threat, but we feel like there's something we can do. We can either uh, fight against it or remove ourselves, fight or flight. And it's activated. And the collapse state, the dorsal state, is when it doesn't feel like there's anything we can do about the threat. So we'll play dead, go numb, collapse, be invisible. And those states are nervous system states that organize our body differently, as well as our way of making sense of things in our mind. But they're on a spectrum. It's not like you're in this state or you're in this state or you're in this state. So all of us move through all those states or versions of them. Um, and it's just totally normal. So we you might feel yourself in an activated state just because of uh, the lighting that's on in the room, or too many people around to feel comfortable, or or you're having an anxiety attack, or there's a real threat, and or you might feel a tiny bit anxious. Calling it anxious instead of activated already kind of pulls in an idea that there's a threat or something to fear, because anxiety is on that fear spectrum, isn't it? But to recognize it just as an activated state in the nervous system, I mean, we can get activated to certain kinds of music. And it isn't necessarily about a threat at all, but the nervous system just does that. We just do that. You might get, I got activated a little bit just before the interview started and it's more about excitement, I think, for me. And, and yet the physical sensation of it is really close to fear. So I think understanding that those states of the nervous system, as described in polyvagal, they're different vagal states, the vagus nerve being a nerve that goes through the whole body. It affects digestion as well as heart rate, as well as mind activity. That we all go through all of them, that they're totally normal states, and they're on a spectrum. And so we can pay attention to the state we're in and recognize where it is on that spectrum, uh, and and pay attention to what seems to be influencing my nervous system state. Is it something external? Is it my own thoughts? My digestion can affect my nervous system state. As I said, lighting, or numbers of people around, or music, lots of things can. But I think this is one of the things about using a practice of paying attention to what is my embodied state right now, and then being curious about what's influencing it. And that's the first thing. And then getting curious and experimental around what might shift it in a positive way. What seems to shift it in a way that makes it feel worse? And what can I do? Can I think something? Can I change the music? Can I move into another room? What can I do that seems somehow to influence the state I'm in a positive way? And the more options we have, the more options each of us are aware of that can influence how we feel in a positive way, the less likely we are to be addicted to one strategy or one behavior or one substance. If the more ways I know to influence my own state, the more choices I have and the more freedom I have to make those choices. And that feels like liberation. That feels like what recovery is about for all of us. Recovering from the habits that were started off as strategies and management behaviors and have ended up causing suffering. What else is possible?
Lovely, thank you. Um, I've heard you say that when you're working with somebody, you're looking for nourishment. I'd be really interested to hear more of what you mean, because you've linked that with when you're looking for nourishment and the times that you see that spark of what in polyvagal language would be called a ventral vagal spark, or in IFS language would be called, you see the self emerging, coming to the forefront. And it seems to me that that's very linked. You're looking for nourishment is going to attract or draw because I'm interested that you say that in your teaching, you often say there's nothing to fix. And for many of us coming from traditional therapy models, that's quite revolutionary and very welcome. I'd love to hear you say more. Thank you.
There's so many thoughts come up in response to that. Ron Kurtz and Hakomi uses the word nourishment a lot, and it started off. His idea was it started off as that realizing that when we're working in a psychotherapy kind of setting with someone and paying attention to what habits that they're probably not conscious of, habitual beliefs and habitual behaviors are actually causing suffering. Or if not causing actual suffering, at least they're in the way of something that would be nourishing. And he used to talk about a missing experience. I've kind of gotten away from referring to it as a missing experience because, again, it sounds like something wrong. But think of it this way, whatever we do that's habitual, especially if it's on automatic, might start off as a protective strategy, but if it's on automatic and overgeneralized, it gets in the way of something else that would be nourishing. I'll give you a simple example, is if somebody has an experience of being lied to and manipulated with hypocrisy, naturally, the behavior that would come out of that is mistrust. The feeling, but it's also a behavior, and it expresses itself somatically too. I mean, one obvious expression of it is this. If you're talking to somebody and they're looking at you like this, there's a little bit of mistrust there, or at least doubt. So to the degree that that's on automatic and overgeneralized, what's the missing experience? Well, the missing experience is the feeling of trusting somebody, not everybody. The opposite is not, and the antidote is not, you know, from mistrusting everybody to trusting everybody. The missing experience is trusting somebody who's trustworthy. So everything that we do that's habitual on automatic, um, even if it serves us in some way or in some situations, creates a missing experience. And the experience that we're missing is something that would be nourishing that can't happen because of what we're doing. So that was the first way he would talk about nourishment is when we're working with somebody, we're curious and we're helping them make a discovery about something that they're doing that if they didn't do it or if they did something differently, they would have a nourishing experience that they're not having. I mean, I can think of so many, this is true for all of us. I can think of so many examples of one funny example for me is I remember walking down the street one time, so caught up in my thoughts and something I needed to do and going over a conversation that didn't work and just, in my mind and in my thoughts. And and all of a sudden kind of woke up out of that and realized there was these sunflowers over the fence I was walking along. These sunflowers were nodding at me, these massive beautiful sunflowers, that if in this world I was completely missing these beautiful sunflowers that were there as a gift to me, just nodding at me as I walked along. It's such a simple example, but I think there's so many moments in the day that all of us are missing something that if we weren't missing it, it would be nourishing. And especially what are we doing habitually that's in the way of some kind of nourishment? and when I'm teaching yoga, I think the invitation is to discover the body habits. For example, I think it started off as a preparation for meditation, yoga, physical practice of yoga. It can be so nourishing to be able to sit comfortably, cross-legged, for hours at a time in pure stillness. But for many of us, sitting for 5 minutes cross-legged or 2 minutes is anything but nourishing. It causes suffering. And so the practice, the movement practice, is about releasing the kind of tension patterns that get in the way of being able to be comfortable in our body in any position. That's the idea in yoga. And so that's also the idea in a psychotherapy setting or in a personal practice of self-awareness. So uh, the other application of the word nourishment that Ron developed when I was working with him came from a realization he had during one session with a guy. And he was actually, the story is that he was teaching Hakomi in Germany, somewhere in Germany. I'm not sure where he was. It was before I met him. And he was doing a demonstration with a fella that was the client. And he was German speaking, so it was through a translator. And Ron didn't speak very much German or understand it. So he had a translator that was telling him what the guy was saying. And Ron tells the story that the guy was talking so much that he kind of lost this. Ron lost the story. He was trying to hear the guy and he was trying to listen to the translator, and he ended up realizing he had no idea what the guy was talking about. So he was a funny guy, Ron Kurtz. He said, "So I decided I'd just fake it. I pretend I was understanding him." So he sat there, but letting go of the need to understand the story, he began to really be present for the guy. And he said he started to feel really nourished by being there. He started to feel like this, the feel honored that the guy was willing to open up to him this way. He started to feel really touched by the guy's um, courage and vulnerability. Meanwhile, the guy, the client, was telling his story with his eyes closed. And Ron realized that his own personal state was changing so much the more he felt nourished just being with this guy, that he asked the translator to invite the guy to open his eyes, because he thought if he opens his eyes and sees me, he's going to realize I'm in a different state. And when the man opened his eyes and looked at Ron and saw Ron in what Ron later described as loving presence, in this quality of presence where he was just feeling like being with the guy was a gift, just being here. I'm being nourished being with you. The guy burst into tears. The story was gone. The healing was happening. And so Ron began to teach the practice of loving presence, which is not about being loving towards somebody. It's about taking in somebody as a source of nourishment for me. How can I sit with you? How can I be with you and feel you as a source of nourishment? I can be inspired, I can be touched. How can I find a way to be present that makes me feel good? And magically, I see those of you I can see nodding and getting it. That touches the other person in such a healing way. It's not because I'm trying to give you love. It's because I'm taking you in your awesomeness, in your beauty. And I'm doing it for me because it feels so nourishing for me. And that became the foundation of the teaching right when I was working with Ron. So was what we wrote. We started writing the book, and it didn't get finished before he died in 2011. And it sat for a year or two, and then I finally got back to it and finished it. But it's really what I think was his greatest legacy is this practice of being present in this way with somebody that ends up being healing because, but healing in a really mutual way. Healing because not because I'm trying to heal you, but because I'm letting myself be nourished by being with you means I'm seeing you as right. I'm seeing what's right about you. I'm not looking for what's wrong. That's why there's nothing to fix. I'm taking you in as who you truly are in all your beauty and awesomeness. Uh, the only thing to fix, and it isn't really fixing, is the delusion that there's something wrong with us. And so we're not fixing so much as we're just bringing into consciousness what's in the way of being in this natural state that all of us were born into, but because of the adaptations and the traumatic experiences and the need to react to life, sometimes in drastic ways, we've forgotten who we truly are. And so it's a bringing into consciousness what's in the way and bringing into consciousness what else is possible.
Well, that's an incredibly beautiful way to close the speaking part of our session. I have one question, if that's okay. What is the question you wish people asked you about this work but rarely do?
Wow. What come I'll digress a little bit, I think, to answer that. Um, uh, I was recently on a bit of a panel of Hakomi legacy holders that we're being asked different questions. And one of the questions was about how each of us felt like we were carrying on the legacy of Ron, what it meant to us, because we all do it differently. There's something essential about this just intention to see the best of people, to support them to be more aware of themselves, to to use little experiments done mindfully with curiosity to bring habits into consciousness that aren't necessary anymore, and to discover what else is possible, and to remember who we truly are. So lots of different techniques and methodologies can do that, but that's the essence of it. And but what happens in a group of people that are practicing Soma or Hakomi or anything like that, I think, is and can happen in support groups. And this is what I've seen over the, and I was involved with quite a few 12-step groups, and the best of them, the healthiest ones, and the support groups that really are healthy, um, create a kind of community where people are relating to each other human to human, where there isn't a hierarchy, other than some people have more experience with something than another, but it's so mutually respectful, almost reverent, the way people relate to each other in these kinds of groups with these kind of practices. You'll know what I mean, definitely. And it's a kind of honoring. It's a way of meeting and relating that is peacemaking is the word I use. And I think this is needed in the world. So whatever healing journey each of us is on that's personal, and whatever way we can support the group of people that we're that we spend time with, that we meet up with. I think this needs to go into the world in a bigger way. I think the question I'd love all of us to ask is, how can I take what's healing for me here out there and 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 bring peace to the world? Let's make it a world, a global mission. So, and I think we know how to do it when we've felt even a one-to-one relationship that's like that, where we meet with people, no matter how different they are from us in some ways, but we know what we have in common. And when we meet at that place where we have something in common, the differences don't matter. It's not that they disappear, but they don't matter in the same way, because all conflict in the world is about differences. It's all them and us thinking, them and us, and it's neurobiological. We're designed that way, apparently. We're designed to for survival, to recognize whether people feel like they're us or they're them. And and it's time to get beyond that. And you know how to do that. You all know how to do that. And people learn how to do that in a Hakomi group or in a Soma group or in groups, Buddhist groups. And there are some that aren't healthy, but when it's healthy, it's healing and it's peacemaking. And how can we take this out beyond just our personal lives in this group and take it into the world, not as preaching, evangelists, but as, you know, Ron used to talk about you could check out of the grocery store and say something to the clerk that would make their day. A healing moment. It's not about doing healing sessions on people. It's just relating to people in this way. And it is going to spread and create peace, and it's going to be 100th monkey phenomenon eventually, I think.
That's really wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful listening to you. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us.
Thank you for inviting me to this. Really, it's been a real joy, and I feel understood, which is one of the things that's most nourishing for me. Um, I just would love everybody to play with how it feels when you're sitting in a space where you feel like you can just be present, be peaceful, be at ease, and inhabit that as an embodied experience, because that is who you are, and that's your greatest resource. Thank you again.